So that was the only known or existing video of the soprano Zinka Milanov singing Visidarte from Giacomo Puccini's Tosca. And this is a picture of the Metropolitan Opera House where she reigned as the queen for probably almost 30 years. She has two careers at the Opera House, one from 1937 to 1947, and then one from 1951 to 1966. In 1951, she returned to the Met at 45 years old, and basically until her retirement in 1966, she continued on. She reigned as queen of the Italian operatic repertoire wing from 1937 until 1957 or 8. So at the time of this video, which is 1956, Zinka Milanov is 50 years old. So I basically decided I'm going to do two videos of this type. This is the Metropolitan Opera edition, and the other is going to be the Midnight Special edition, because that one is based on people like Elton John, Barry White, Tom Jones, Gordon Lightfoot, people of that nature, Glenn Campbell. But as I was watching the Midnight Special, I became really interested in how did certain people's career trajectories go from either being temporal fame or being lasting fame, right? So I was watching the Midnight Special and watching people like Elton John, who's still relevant, Barry White, who's still very, very well remembered, Tom Jones, who's relatively remembered in certain circles, I'm sure, and then somebody like Gordon Lightfoot, who's completely forgotten. Maybe the songs he sang are not, but he himself, as an artist, is completely forgotten. And so I started thinking about, well, how would that show up astrologically? And I started, gathering those charts. Then, with my own particular interest in opera, I thought about Zinka Milanov. I thought about the Metropolitan Opera. I thought about people losing their voices, people's careers, why some careers last a long time, why some careers go up and go up and go up, why some careers start high and end low. And I thought about this moment, the moment of this video where Zinka Milanov is singing. She's just sung Tosca at the Metropolitan Opera House for the first time the year before in 1955. She's been singing the role since 1928. Okay, so she's been singing the fucking role since 1928. But let's just give you an idea. I mean, everything about the performance there is so old-fashioned, right? So old-fashioned. Everything we kind of hate about the opera singer. But to think of the kind of the freshness of the voice at that particular age, at 50. So certainly the management was thinking along these same lines. Hey, she's in great shape, but she came back at 45. We don't have that much time with her. What are we going to do? Who's going to take over this wing? Because the Italian operatic wing, especially the parts that she herself sang, we'll call it the dramatic Italian wing, which is stuff that is composed by Giacomo Puccini and Giuseppe Verdi, but especially Verdi. Things like Aida, things like La Forza del Destino and Un ballo in maschera. These are big operatic pieces for a big operatic soprano, and any soprano that's able to do that or that becomes kind of known for that repertoire is one of the most valuable people at the opera house, is one of the most valuable people on the stage, is one of the most valuable people in opera, the leading exponent of those roles in opera. A role like Aida, that is the doorway to international fame and to trotting the boards at every opera house in the world and becoming renowned and known. So this is the reason I'm bringing up this. Zinka Milanov held a very important and prestigious position at the Met, and necessary position at the Met. In order for this repertoire to be able to be sung, it had to have someone of her caliber. So what was the Met going to do? What was they going to do when the minute that she decided to leave, or that she declined enough so that she could no longer sing her roles. A time that was coming, right? A time that was precipitating. So in 1955, they hired Renata Tebaldi, and they were looking for someone to, I don't want to say take her place, but to continue on in that repertoire after she's no longer able. As I said, she was doing that repertoire at the Met from 1937 until approximately 1958, 57 or 58. And then those last 8 years of her career, she was doing her kind of retirement roles, which Tosca was one of them, believe it or not. Anyway, but so they hired Renata Tebaldi in 1955. Renata Tebaldi made her professional debut in 1944 or 1943. She retired after 30 years in 1973. This is one of the most beloved opera singers of her period, of the time, of the 20th century. Still highly beloved, greatly beloved. This is a person who had vocal problems, right? So what I'm interested in when I'm looking at these charts is longevity of career, how high the career or how celebrated or how high the career went, which that might need to be using something a little bit different. And then third, the nature of the voice itself, right? Those are the things of the nature of the voice itself, since we're talking about a vocal medium. This person had to take a year off in order to refurbish their voice and diminished and continued in diminished capacity for the rest of their career, for the last 10 years of their career. So 30 years, respectable as hell, and high, like I said, one of the most beloved. In 1956, they hired Antonietta Stella. Antonietta Stella made her career debut, or um, her professional debut in 1950, and she basically retired in 1974. So nice 24-year career. This person was pushed very hard, very fast, and basically did too much too fast, and made some decisions that ended up screwing her over, in my opinion. And also, basically, this person started big, started what I call started international, and ended regional. Right. So the shortest career of all of them is this one. And it's also the career that started with a lot more promise than it ended. It started very promising and ended not so well. So that's 1956. They hired Antonietta Stella, and they really believed Stella was going to be was really going to take it over. In 1959, they hired Leonie Rieseneck. And Leonie Rieseneck is from Vienna. They hired her from where she was working with Carl Böhm in Vienna. And this is a problematic voice. Always had problematic issues with the voice. This person has the longest career. She made her debut in 1949, and she performed her last performance in 1996. 47 years. So this person has a problem voice. This voice is problematic and has issues that plagued it throughout its career. And this person, in order to extend their career, converted downwards from soprano to mezzo soprano. In 1961, they hired Leontyne Price, who became the heir apparent. And this career started in 1952 with Porgy and Bess. There was an international touring company of Porgy and Bess for which she was hired, and she sang Bess and became acclaimed as Bess for it. And then her last performances are 1994. Her last Met performance is 1985, which was televised. Her last performances are 1994. So that career lasts, what, 42 years? So 42-year career. The longest is Leonie Rieseneck, 47 years. Another beloved singer, another beloved performer. Antonietta Stella, whose career started big, but then went Chris Glad after a little while, then went kind of locally, went mostly Italian and regional. Um, And well, so Vivaldi, of course, is the probably of that time period of the 20th century is the great Italian soprano of that time period. So she is the great Italian soprano of that repertoire. Soprano of Italian nationality. Renata Vivaldi is still considered the creme de la creme, one of the highest, and is still beloved and deeply, deeply beloved by fans still, and highly recorded. And then, of course, Lanty Price, who is still alive, still with us at 99, and 42-year career. Okay, so what I was looking at, what I thought I would do is I would look at something specific. And this is my fourth time doing this because the last time, which actually worked really well, I actually fucked up and I didn't include the sound. So what we're going to look at, I decided to look at is we're going to look at the ruler of the 10th. We're not going to go deep into Benatti to kind of to look at maybe how high a person goes or any of that right now. We might do that for the other one. So for this one, we're just going to look at three things. We're going to look at the ruler of the 10th. We're going to look at the part of kingdom. We're going to look at the triplicity rulers of the 10th, and we'll talk about that in a second. So this part is called the part of kingship and victory and assistance. It's taken from Sun to Saturn by day and by night the reverse. Okay, it's the same as the part of Father. And when it is well disposed or of good condition, and especially when it's with the Lord of the 10th house and with the Lord of the ascendant, it signifies kingship for the native. If he is one of those who are fit for kingship, it signifies honor and exaltation for each according to his being. And further, he will be extended and preferred and prevail over those of his own kind. That's what I'm looking for. He will be extended and preferred and prevail over those of his own kind. That's what I'm interested in. Abba Massar said that if it is in a sign which the Lord of the Ascendant or the Lord of the 10th has dignity, which we will look at, it will signify victory for the native over those who contend with him. That's what we're looking for. The same thing will happen in revolutions if this part is so disposed. So when you think about something like the world of opera or the world of sports, what you generally have is competitors and contenders and colleagues. I used to say when I was in classical music, there are competitors and colleagues. And when you work in classical music especially, you come across, you brush up against both. They're very, very highly competitive people who can't stand to see somebody do better than they want to be the most recognized. And then there are people who are in for the thrill of the game, love to hear good singing from anybody, love to be involved in a great production, and are fabulous to work with, so that whole thing. So who against whom we contend is an important thing. And so we'll look at that from that perspective. The other way I wanted to look at this was from the perspective of the triplicity rulers. And so triplicity means element, right? These are the four elements. And there's air, earth, fire, water. And as a result, what we end up having is three planets for each of these elements that have rulership over the end. And there's a daytime ruler who takes precedent by day. There's a nighttime ruler who takes precedent by night, and a participator. And so we're going to look at the triplicity rulers for this 10th house and see how they participate. Now, this is my fourth time doing this. So my first two, I was trying to adhere to something specific. So the ancient astrologers used the triplicity rulers in two ways. The first way was to divide the life into three equal parts. The second was, or to divide the area of life in three equal parts. So, for instance, we're talking about the 10th house. So for the first, I usually take it up to the solar return. So for the first 28 years of life, the first triplicity ruler in the daytime, this is nighttime. So the night triplicity ruler would be the first one. Then the second from 28 to 57, the second one would take over. From this case, it would be Venus. So it'd be Mars for this one for the first because it's nighttime. Then the second one would be Venus, and the third one would be the moon, right? So they would do that by dividing the life. But they also would divide up significations, and they would basically attach the significations to each of them. So in this particular case, number 10, it's all about kingdom. The first ruler of the 10th house, first ruler of the triplicity of the kingly house, rules work exaltations and the elevation to a higher seat of authority and to the highest dwelling. The second lord signifies the voice of command and the audacity of the same. And the third signifies the stability and durability. So yeah, I looked at that and it ain't working. Or in my opinion, it ain't working. We'll keep it in mind. But what I did do was I used the second one, since we're talking about a career that involves the voice, I use the second one to participate in what's going on with the person's voice, because what goes on with the person's voice is analogous to what goes on with the person's career. So we're looking at the 10th house ruler. Of course, we're always going to look at the part of fortune. In this case, we're going to see that the part of spirit shows up quite a bit more. But definitely, we're going to look at, we'll be looking at the what did I say? 10th house ruler, triplicity rulers of the 10th house, but just as participators, not specifically to go with that. And we'll see how it does or does not work. And then we'll look at the part of kingdom. So once again, so the quandary is, what are we going to do when Zinka Milanov decides to stop singing? She loves to sing. If she can sing for as long as she can, she will. So we know that as long as she can keep herself in the public eye and get that applause, she will stay. But we also know that her powers are waning, and that even if she's going to stay singing, she's not going to continue singing the shit she's been singing for the past 30 years. So we need somebody to get in there and sing that shit. So 1955, they get Renata Tebaldi, who, as I said, is one of the most loved people and one of the most loved singers during her time. And as I said, also still to this day, she's one of the most recorded opera singers in history because she basically came into fruition at around the time that the stereo era was coming into fruition, right before and during the stereo era as well. So the mid 50s, so the early and mid 50s is really her main area and time period. That's Renata Tebaldi singing Un bel dì from Madame Butterfly in the year of her essential retirement from opera, 1973. She continued to sing for a few more years after that. So I think I was wrong, really. Maybe 1943 to 1976. I think 76 is probably the very last performance. But in opera to 73. And also rather like Zinka Milanov, the repertoire got more and more limited until I think there might have only been like maybe 3 or 4 roles that she was still singing up to the end. As I mentioned mentioned when we kind of touched on her earlier, this is a person who had a kind of a vocal breakdown or had a vocal crisis, and the vocal crisis was around too much weight. So basically, this person sang in too weighty a manner, kind of weighed their voice down. and it ended up, high notes are important. It ended up basically kind of shortening the top of the voice and making high notes more difficult. And so let's kind of, and then this person had to take a year off and recalibrate and repurpose their voice. And so that's kind of an important thing. So let's look at, first of all, the 10th house ruler is, well, it's a Leo rising chart. 10th house ruler is Venus, who rules rules Taurus. Venus is with the ruler of the ascendant. Venus is with the ruler of the ascendant here. And of course, Venus is beauty and music and all of those things, and Taurus is the throat. And so that would make perfect sense. Note also that this is a sign of attractive voice, even though this is not the significator for the voice, right? The significator for the voice is Mercury, who is the ruler of the second, and who is also the natural significator for the voice itself. So this Mercury is the voice. We'll give that to be the actual voice itself. And then when we get to the triplicity rulers, we'll bring those two together. Now, note here that Mercury is in the sign of Saturn. Saturn rules things that are heavy. So first of all, that connects to this issue of weight. But Mercury is in Aquarius, which is a sign of attractive voice. Saturn here is exalted. It's retrograde, but exalted. So in my opinion, that shows that there probably could be, it's not just an attractive voice, but a supremely attractive voice. It could be a supremely beautiful voice, right? With that kind of connection with the dispositor, right? The voice should be not just attractive, but supremely attractive, right? It'd be kind of be the same kind of thing. I mean, right? That makes perfect sense, and indeed it was. Even to the extent that if we looked at the triplicity rulers, right? Well, we've looked at Venus already, and we see she's combust. She's in Aquarius. She's combust. She's also there in Aquarius in that attractive sign, but with the Saturn, right? And note that there's that mutual reception between Venus and Saturn. Saturn is things that are heavy. Saturn is heaviness. And note also Saturn here, this is a separating trine, but Saturn here is retrograde. And there's a discussion about retrograde in these texts where they talk about needing to turn away, issues that you create that need to be turned away from. And so, Saturn is in Libra, which is already aesthetic. We can see that more than likely this person would have since Saturn rules these four planets, that this person would have a strong sense of responsibility, a strong aesthetic sense, right? Because of Libra, a strong sense of decorum and what's right, doing what's right, etc. Because Saturn in Libra tends to be very diplomatic and very socially correct. So those things, so that kind of thing kind of shows up in this voice thing already. We got this Saturn ruled vocal thing, the Saturn ruled vocal apparatus. Saturn is the things that are heavy. Saturn is exalted, but he's also retrograde, so it means that it can be really great raw material, but maybe there are issues that have to be worked with. This is further confirmed when we look at the triplicity rulers. So this was the first chart that made me think, well, maybe there's something to the significations of the triplicity rulers, but I wasn't sure about the first one, right? Because it's nighttime, so the first triplicity ruler is the moon, right? Because she's the nighttime ruler. She's the nighttime ruler of the triplicity. And so we would start with her and then go to Venus. Venus is the daytime ruler. So for this daytime chart, we would start with Venus and then go to the moon. So the moon represents how high this person has gotten, right? The seat of exaltation, remember? That doesn't make sense. It's with K2, it's peregrine, and it's Caden, even though the ninth house is a positive house. That doesn't make any sense to me. However, we can use it as a participator, so that we get more of an understanding of what must be going on with this person in their career. Note that the moon's applying to the opposition of Saturn. Moon-Saturn opposition is struggle. And note also that the Saturn does not receive the moon. The Saturn does not receive the moon. So in this particular case, this is called a return of virtue. And it's called a return of virtue with detriment. I hadn't even thought about that in my third iteration of this fucking video. But it's called a return of virtue, and it's with detriment. And the reason that it's with detriment is that the planet that is applying to the planet that is either retrograde or combust is not received, and it is not in an angular or succeeding house. So that means that this triplicity ruler is basically the way that they describe return of virtue is I've got this very heavy box of stones or bag of stones, and I come up to the other planet and say, hey, can you help me with this bag of stones? And the planet says, sure. If there is if it's not retrograde or combust, it says absolutely I'll help you with that bag of stones, or no I won't help you, or but I will enter into relationship with you around these stones. And then if it's a return of virtue, it's the person, the other planet can't help you with the stones because they're too weak. Oh, sorry, I broke my arm. Oh, sorry, I'm blind. If the planet is combust, so sorry, I can't really see very well. I wouldn't be able to help you. If it's retrograde, oh, sorry, I double booked myself, or I can't help you. But either way, the planet cannot be relied on, so it returns the virtue back to the initial planet. Remember that the moon is not just one of the triplicity rulers, but she's the exaltation ruler of this chart or of this 10th house. That means that the moon has to do it on her own. She won't have the power of the Saturn. And so the opposition will happen, but there won't be any can also the fact that moon is in the fall of Saturn. So the Saturn won't help her. So this might also be a reason that she couldn't fully integrate or process the need of what to do with the weight, right? And also, this would create anxiety. This would create an anxious person who struggle. And one of the interesting things about Renata's Baldi is that, especially after 1959, you can visibly see her struggling. You can see the struggle, especially in the adoption of habits that don't really help the voice, but that help her mind. The moon is the mind. That's a great example. The moon is the mind. She's definitely one of these singers who adopt weird vocal, like not really vocal tics, but like physical tics in order to aid them towards getting to certain things. She gets to a high note, she puts her hand over her ear so she can hear it. She starts going up, she lowers her jaw. I mean, I'm sorry to get into the jargony things here, but my point is that if you were to watch her, you would get the sense of discomfort. There's Saturn too. The sense of discomfort in the singing, so that there should be struggle and discomfort. All right, so remember, this is the person that had to stop and recalibrate. So already we can see in the triplicity rulership and the exaltation rulership struggle and discomfort. And here in this particular case, the moon will have 6 or 7 points because she'll have both the exaltation and the triplicity, whereas Venus only has the domicile at 5 points. So the moon might be the winner here. The moon might be the fucking winner. No, she's not, because Venus also has the term. But the moon could be the winner, the Almutan, the Almumtaz. In which case, that would be the reigning issue would be this discomfort, this anxiety around the discomfort and the limitations and working against the limitations. Very interesting. So moving from that, we move to the second triplicity ruler, which is Venus, which is already the ruler of the 10th. But now looking at it from this, basically I don't think we have to do much more. We've talked about the mutual reception, which in my opinion makes the ability now in this now here's a good situation. In this particular case, even though the Venus um is not applying, she's separating. It only happens, the return of virtue only happens in an applying aspect. But when this Venus was applying with fitness because there was a mutual reception between them. When the moon applies, there is no fitness. There is no fitness between them. So there's nothing that's working. So maybe that's why the voice didn't collapse completely, or that she made the necessary, because this is a person who's very responsive. So this is a person who probably took very deep responsibility for, serious, very serious person who took very right because everything's ruled by Mars. The ruler of the ascendant is ruled by, I mean, Saturn. The ruler of the ascendant is ruled by Saturn. The ruler of Venus, the ruler of the 10th is ruled by Saturn. Um, Saturn's exalted. Mars is in his own sign in Scorpio. This chart is serious as a heart attack. So I think that this person, the thing that saved it, because it could have just let things go. It was so uncomfortable and so much anxiety, etc. She could have just stopped, or she could have just not recalibrated. But I think this is what allowed her to do so, is the mutual reception between the Saturn and the Venus, despite the retrogradation, despite the return of virtue. Once again, this career lasted about 30 years. I mean, all of these ladies sang for a long time, sang for a good long time. And this career ended, so we can say that maybe reputationally, this career was no longer at its height, but as far as love and appreciation of audience, it never waned. Never. So let's look at the part of kingdom, and let's see if that aspect of never waning, that love, and of course Venus is the goddess of love, and the 10th house is Taurus. But this moon Saturn doesn't speak of that love. Even all of this stuff in Aquarius, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily speak of it, or maybe it does. Certainly, remember that the 7th house represents the public. And we see that mutual reception between the ruler of the 10th and the public itself. And even here, there's a reception between Saturn. Well, there's Saturn receives the sun, right? So even there, we've got Saturn receives the sun, who is the person themselves. The sun doesn't receive Saturn, but Saturn receives the sun. So that means that Saturn is receiving both the Venus and the sun. That's the ruler of the 7th, which is the general public. And by trine. Anyway, and then the moon is also the general public, but that doesn't, wait, and the connection maybe between that and the ruler of the 10th, she's applying the next thing she'll do is after the Saturn, she'll apply to the Venus by sextile. But with the detriment here, so not so good for the Venus, good for the moon, but not so good or not necessarily good for either of them. Anyway, I digress. So, it's nighttime Saturn to Sun, 120 plus 5, right? 8 Libra to 13 Aquarius. So 120 plus 5, 21 Sagittarius. Nothing is on it, right? So none of the things that Bonatti talked about is happening. Does the ruler of the first or the ruler of the 10th have dignity in the sign? Sun or Venus? No. However, what we do have is we've got the ruler of the kingdom on the lot of spirit here. Remember that the lot of spirit is called the futurorum, and we use it and the planet to figure out how high in life the person will go. How high in life the person will go, right? And certain configurations, we can see that the person will be very famous or whatever, but that means that we know not just have we have the Lord of Kingdom on the part of spirit, but we have the exaltation ruler of the part of spirit on the part of spirit with the Lord of Kingdom. That helps. And then we also have the ruler of the ascendant applying to the trine of the ruler of the kingdom. Now, unfortunately, doesn't really help the part of the ruler of the ascendant much, right? Because Aquarius is the detriment, and then it's applying to a planet in its fall. However, music and the aesthetics of music is represented by Libra, so that can certainly give a Libran kingdom to this person. That can create an ease towards the Libran kingdom. So there is a connection between the ruler of the kingdom and both the ruler of the 10th and the ruler of the ascendant. Okay, so there we've got that. In 1956, they hired Antonietta Stella. And I want to read something that was said about Antonietta Stella because, first of all, we've got another Leo rising chart, right? But look at the difference here. We went from that Venus Sun in the Aquarius, and note how now the Mercury is very angular, right on the cusp of the exact same degree as Tibaldi, right? And also still ruling the voice, naturally ruling the voice, and then ruling the voice by second house. But look now here how the ruler of the ascendant's in the 8th, on the cusp of the 8th. going down into the underworld. And the Jupiter, the ruler of the eighth, is with this Venus, who's the ruler of the 10th. That should be good. But the ruler of the eighth is connected to the ruler of the 10th here. Right. So the interesting thing about Antonietta Stella is she is kind of a morning glory. She was a shooting star. She was pushed really, really fast, really far, really fast. She's a beautiful woman. She's a good actress. She was a good actress, and she had a great voice, a biggish voice, but sang too big, too much. Note here we've got Regulus on the ascendant. This person was kind of destined for a type of stardom. But the interesting thing about Antonietta Stella is that she's got the shortest career of all of the ladies here. Right, we were already talking about Tibaldi, who sang for about 33 years. Antonietta Stella started in 1950, was finished singing by 1974. Only 24 years, and she started international, and she ended regional. Now that's an interesting thing altogether.
Io me ne stavo sotto il tavolino aspettando cader qualche moneta. La vedevo serrar furtiva il piè al babbo mio. Stava intorno.
Okay, that's Antonietta Stella singing La nel Soledad from La Fanciulla del West in 1963. The opera La Fanciulla del West had its world premiere at the Metropolitan Opera House in 1910. Yeah, 1910. 1909. 1909 or 1910. The famous Enrico Caruso was in the world premiere of this. So this is even germane to our discussion. This is even germane to the house that we're talking about. This particular opera had its world premiere at this opera house at the Metropolitan. Um, of course, a person that doesn't know anything about opera wouldn't maybe hear some of the things that are going on in the voice. Around kind of the diminishment. Mind you, this is 1963. 10 years earlier, or even 5 years earlier, that voice was even more ample and more beautiful. And so that's an interesting thing. Now, when we look at this particular chart, I want to say there's something that I wanted to read, and I thought it was a really interesting thing that they had said about, and I just because it really describes exactly what we're talking about. She is prodigal of voice and talented in acting. In using too much power, she endangered the quality of her voice. And in singing her big arias, she appeared dramatic without always moving the listener. Her pianissimo singing was beautiful, her range of dynamics impressive, and her bearing that of a princess, Regulus on the ascendant, as handsome in looks as in action. And you can see it from that picture there. So you've got this beautiful woman, and think about how many opera singers are fat and ugly, short and fat and ugly. So you've got this beautiful statuesque woman, good actress, the whole package, right? A fabulous actress, beautiful voice, but there's this profligacy. There's this giving too much. There's this too much of a good thing. And it's a path to destruction. It's a path to the underworld. Too much of a good thing that's a path to the underworld. I think that this showed itself in two ways. I think this showed itself in an inability to say no, because remember, Jupiter loves to say yes. Jupiter, if Saturn is no, Jupiter is yes. So inability to say no, overestimation of their abilities. Jupiter is inflation. self-inflation. This is the sun, which rules the head in this chart, right? The mind. Also, the moon, which rules the mind, is with this Jupiter. This is Jupiter. Should have been, I mean, on paper, looking at it, if we just looked at these four charts, somebody would have thought that, oh, this is the career that did the best. An exalted planet right there on the cusp of the 10th, the ruler of the 10th in its own sign with Jupiter. But this is what I mean about any planet can become a functional malefic. Jupiter rules the fifth, which is highly benefic, but he also rules the eighth, which is malefic, and will take whatever it connects to into the underworld. It will take it down. So the Jupiter takes it down. The voice is beautiful, right? The voice is attractive voice. Mercury rules the second. Remember, Virgo is also a sign of attractive voice. Attractive voice, attractive voice. Then we've got Saturn, who's in that kind of half voice, Capricorn, but strong in his own sign and receiving the trine from these two, right? So that would certainly make the voice very beautiful, kind of viscerally beautiful. Kind of sensually, viscerally. There should be a visceral aspect to it, right? Because it's not the air aspect of Saturn; it's the Earth aspect of Saturn. So there should be something imposing, and that might have been part of the problem: the need to feel imposing, the need to be more imposing. We've already looked at this Venus with the Lord of the Eighth, who can bring it down, right? It's not, oh, we're going to see another chart with Venus Jupiter. We saw this also with Ella Fitzgerald. Remember Venus, Sun, and Jupiter, and it was with the eighth, right? Jupiter was the eighth, but it was also close, and this Venus, Sun were Casimir, etc. So it was a little bit different. It was a little bit different, not quite the same here. Um, Next, let's look at the triplicity rulers. It's daytime, so we've already looked at Venus, who is the first triplicity ruler by day, and this Venus Jupiter. Then we would look next at the moon, who's right here on the cusp, and that would represent the voice of command. And so here we would see that there might be a lot, that part of the problem with saying no is that there may have been an ambition to do all of these things because Rahu is the agent of ambition. So this person may have been very, very ambitious and very going for the most prestigious choice and all of the time. And this got that person into trouble. Because essentially, remember, Rahu is the mouth of the dragon. Greed. It can be greed and avarice and venality. I think that this part of the too much of a good thing was that this person got too ambitious. And one of the things that this person did was she canceled a performance with the Metropolitan Opera so that she could perform at another house at a prestigious opening night performance at another house. And the Met found out in 1960, and they fired her. And really, after that Met debacle, we start to see that pretty much Antonietta Stella only sings in Italy. Only sings in Italy. So next we would go to the third triplicity ruler, right? But my point about this too is if this is the voice, so we would have ambition that would lead towards, that would be connected to this profligacy, this giving too much, this inability to say no. But also remember that as the mouth of the dragon and as the tail of the dragon, the demon here, the south node and the north node, they have the ability to eclipse the lights. And indeed, if we're looking at this as a participator for the voice, right? Because it was the voice of command and the audacity to do so, right? This is a person singing Aida and Forza del Destino at 21 and 22 and 23, right? So I mean, you have to have super solid technique and know-how to be able to do that stuff very early. And I think that once again, the Jupiter overestimation, overinflation of abilities, and then this Rahu having the ability to devour this moon, right? The ability to devour this moon and say, and so to devour the voice, so that the voice could be devoured by its ambition. And I think that's really what happened. And then the last thing that we see here, we have another interesting thing with this part of spirit. The last triplicity ruler is on the part of spirit, but it's fallen and opposing and separating from an opposition to Saturn. So certainly this ambition of hers, this ambition that led to a bad choice, because remember, Rahu is a shadowy planet. So it represents kind of the things, the unspeakable things that we will do to get what we want. Not just the sacrifices, but the unspeakable, the way that we debase ourselves for what we want, or the way that we will hurt somebody else to do what we want, or to get what we want. That's Rahu. That's at any cost. The at any cost aspect of Rahu is, I think, part of the problem here. And that certainly led to her decision to play hooky from a performance, which then created calamity in the career. And once again, this is on the spirit, which is the future. And note here that it's in Cancer, which is ruled by this moon that we were just talking about. This is the future. This is part of futurorum, right? And how high the person goes in life. This person can't go very high. It looks like they could, right? But then we've got this on the cusp. Then we've got this on the cusp of it, right? So that points to calamity. That points to shit fucking up, to a fuck up. That points to a fuck up. And indeed, there was a fuck up. And like I said, after that happened in 1960, we almost consistently see her either only singing in Europe, and as the years progress, only mostly in Italy. Okay, moving on. In 1959. Oh wait, we didn't look at the part of Kingdom. So it's daytime, so Sun to Saturn, that's back 90 degrees, so 24 to 24, and then forward 6. So back 90 degrees, 30, which is 30 degrees of Taurus, and forward 6 to Gemini, 6 Gemini. Nothing is on it. Neither the ruler of the 10th or the ruler of the 1st have any kind of dignity in the sign. The Mercury itself is middling dignity but well placed. Right? So that's kind of what we would expect. A well-placed career, but middling dignity. Note also that there's a wide, no, it's a different chart. Oh, but note also, though, that there's the opposition to Neptune. Once again, that could obscure our understanding of who we think we are. And it can create, when I see Mercury, Neptune, I say muddled thinking. It can muddle our thinking. Our thinking is not necessarily always based on what's real, right? So between this and this person may have made calculations and choices based on things that weren't real that ended up diminishing it instead. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty good estimation of that. This is not a bad career. 24 years, a respectable career, singing consistently. What else can you ask for? 1956. 24-year career, that one. So that's the shortest career, Antonietta Stella. This is the longest. So Leonie Rieseneck made her professional debut in 1949, and she finished her last performance in 1996. 47 years trotting the boards of opera houses, of international opera houses. This is an international opera star from probably for 40 years of it. Internationally kind of renowned, at least for probably 37 to 40 years of it, an internationally acclaimed star. This is the voice, the problematic voice. This, Leonie Rieseneck always, from the very beginning, exciting voice, beautiful voice, but problematic voice. Okay, now Leonie Rieseneck was hired in 1959, and her hiring is actually quite interesting because she was slated to sing a different role, but in November of 1958, Maria Callas, the great Maria Callas, the greatest opera singer of the 20th century, one of the very greatest of all time. Maria Callas had been hired in 1956, not as a substitute for Zinka Milanov. Although she probably could have, she started off in that mold, but she ended up becoming something so much more and so much different and so different. But in 1950, but she didn't really like the Met. She didn't really like how it worked, and in 1958 there were disputes over her contract, and she wouldn't sign it, and so Rudolph Bing, the general manager, fired her. And instead of Maria Callas, he brought Leonie Riesnick in to do the new production that she had been slated to do. So that's how Leonie Riesnick came. And within the first year, the first 2 years, there was really a belief that maybe Riesnick was going to take over for that wing. And so remember, 1960 is when Antonietta Stella fucks up. And so Rieseneck is there just in time. So up until about maybe 1962, they're thinking, okay, we've found our person, but it becomes kind of clear that ain't gonna work with Leonie Rieseneck because the voice is too problematic. The voice is beautiful, the voice, but you heard the voice is weird. It's kind of strange, and it's kind of there's a kernel of weird quality to it that never this is one of those people. She's 53 in that performance. She's singing Die Torhalle from Tannhäuser by Richard Wagner. And this is a role that she's saying, this is 1979. Our first recording that we have available is from 1953 of her singing it. So, she already had been singing that role for 26 years. And she goes on to sing it. It's one of the last soprano roles she dropped, right? This is the one who converted to a lower role, to a lower vocal register so that she could continue singing. So, but for 30 years, from maybe 1950 to 1983 or 4 or 35 years, she basically sang as a soprano. And mostly it's because of the top range. So anyway, I'm sorry, I went off a little bit thing on the voice, but this voice was problematic. That's my first point, that this voice is problematic, and in this career, voice is the career, right? Voice dictates to a certain extent the career. Now, of course, there's all these other things that go into it. This is also the only person that falls under the category of a singing actor. Now, Antonietta Stella could also maybe be considered that, but the singing actor primarily is interested in acting and will sacrifice beauty of tone for expression, etc. So that's very much who this person. This is a stage animal. This is a person who lives for the stage. This is a singing actor. This is not so. We're not dealing with the same kind of shall we say, the same kind of vocal deportment and decorum. That's a good term, decorum, right? And there's been a lot of decorum there's been a lot of issues around vocal decorum in the other two. But this person, the issues with the vocal decorum are almost non-existent. So first of all, let's look at the voice itself. Well, we can look at two things. Let's look at the ruler of the 10th, and then let's look at the voice. The rule of the 10th is the moon. The moon is in Pisces. This is one of the most emotionally expressive singers in all of opera. This is one of the most emotionally reactive singers in all of opera. This is one of the most instinctual actors on stage in opera. This is one of the most reactionary, reflexive, and reactionary performers in opera. Matter of fact, one of her famous things that she does is there's a famous scene where a man pulls a sword out of a tree, kind of like King Arthur, and when he does it, she screams. So that kind of extreme in reaction, overt reaction, extreme reactions. That's the moon. Reactions is moon, and that kind of unlimited, that limitless, unlimited kind of no limits to what they will do and how they will emote. Absolutely, Leonie Riesnick, all the way. That's probably part of the reason that she was so loved. And this person was so loved for all of their warts and all. I mean, that's kind of how we are with most singers, warts and all. We love them, but this singer had more warts than usual. So let's look at the voice. Mars is the ruler of the second house. It is in detriment and retrograde. This is a problem voice. Not that it might not be beautiful, right? Mars is in in Venus's sign. Venus rules beauty, right? And it's in Taurus, which rules the throat. So there's going to be a voice. There is beauty in this voice, and certainly, especially the higher it went, the more beautiful, right? But there are problems, right? There are things to turn away from. It's in detriment. It's not in its full power. There are issues and problems to work with. Note that the Venus mutual reception with the Mars helps it, but Venus herself is also detrimented and combust. And that's right here on the cusp of the second, which rules the voice. So we should have a weird muffled quality to the voice, right? Because this is mute, right? So there should be something muffled about it, or something that's not fully clear, not fully clarion, and like a bell that you can hear that's clear. There should be something of a muffled, woolly or muffled type of quality to it, right? And which indeed there was. However, there should be a brilliance, right? Because the sun is here and Venus is here. There should be a beauty and brilliance, but it should be muted. It should not be conventional beauty. This voice should not express conventional beauty. Brilliance, yes. Power, brilliance, yes. Beauty but not in the way that we think of it. Not conventional beauty. That's really what's going down here. Note how this opposite was not really an opposition, but this mutual reception also involves the two triplicity rulers. It's nighttime. So this is triplicity ruler 1, and then this is triplicity ruler 2. And then the moon, who we already talked about, is triplicity ruler 3. The moon is in the fifth house of entertainments and pleasures already. So this person would be inclined towards entertainments, um, right? But it would be warts and all, very human, very human, very vulnerable. Vulnerable. That's another thing for Leonie Risset. Height of vulnerability, and also like a display. Right, sun is display, a display of this flawedness, a display of this flawedness. Okay, so that's kind of what we're seeing with the kind of the substance of the career. Let's look then at the part of kingdom. It's nighttime, backward 7. It's from Saturn to Sun. So that brings us to the 11th degree of Libra, which brings us to Venus and or Saturn, right? All of these planets are in Scorpio, which is ruled by the ruler of the second, right? So all of that stuff is ruled by the rule of the voice. So we see that voice is everything. And one of the things that Leonie Riesnick talked about actually is she actually talked about Zinka Milanov. Zinka Milanov, as we talked about, was starting to wane. So after 1958, 59, or whatever, 1959, when Leonie Riesnick gets there, she wanes. The voice is waning, and but Leonie Riesnick continues to go see her in everything, and she says, "I've always loved beautiful voices. This person is obsessed with the voice." I have always loved beautiful voices, and Zinka Milanov had one of the most beautiful voices. I always saw her whenever I was in New York. So, and she saw her up to the end when she was aging out ultimately. And when other people were telling other people, don't go hear her, she's not what she once was. Rieseneck was like, nah, honey, go hear her. So that's even to me an interesting thing. So where is this? So we did find it. Now, does either the ruler of the first or the ruler of the 10th have any kind of yes, it's in the first house. The ruler of the first has dignity in that sign. And the ruler of the 10th does not, but the ruler of the first has dignity in Libra. We know what kind of state she's in. We know that she's going to give her all, even though it's very flawed. But that's and also with the Saturn. Where's the part of spirit in this chart? It looks like spirit's in Aquarius with the Jupiter, right? So no, nothing necessarily there, but the ruler of the Jupiter is on it. But so the Venus is here with the Sun, and she's involving that. So and look that it's in Scorpio, so even though it's in detriment, it's a fixed sign. So that shows that maybe there could be a fixity to it. There were lots of ups and downs. She received threats she received death threats because she was singing so badly at a certain point, like in the early 60s. So, um, she went through some hard knocks with the career, and with kind of having to deal with the problematic nature of her singing. So what, as I said, it became clear that it wasn't going to be Leonie Risanek, but this is the person with the longest career. This is the person with the longest celebrated, extremely celebrated career. So so far, nothing really points to. I mean, we can kind of see. We saw with Antonietta Stella how that career kind of went on the downward, right? But we don't see, and then also the convertibility, right? Moon is in Pisces. All of the mutable signs are called convertible, mutable and convertible. The moon and Mercury are also called mutable and convertible. This person converted to another register. Note also that Mercury, the significator for the voice, is also in detriment. Right, so even here, this planet is even the natural significator for the voice is in detriment. So this person had issues to overcome, or had obstacles to overcome with the voice, or had material. The voice itself was of a material that was that was questionable, that could be questionable, even though it had certain abilities and certain beauties. All right, so then we come to the heir apparent, the last person they finally found her, and in the most, shall we say, in the most unsuspecting place. Well, maybe or maybe not, because Blanche Price was becoming an absolute superstar, or had become an operatic superstar by the time she got to the Met. The interesting thing about Langston Price is, of course, that 1961 is 4 years or 3 years before the Civil Rights Act, which means that America was working under Jim Crow and segregation, which also means that 1961 is 6 years ahead of 1955, when the very first African American singer was hired to perform a leading role at the Metropolitan Opera, Marian Anderson. So Marian Anderson was the very first operatic singer at the Black African American operatic singer at the Metropolitan, opening the doors for those who would follow. And when Langston Price got to the Met in 1961, there were only four or five. There were maybe five African American singers that were singing there. All of them were covers or second stringers. None of them were major. This is the first time, 19 Price is the first time that an African American soprano becomes an internationally recognized prima donna. And Leontine Price inherits the Italian wing from Zinka Milanov. So, okay, so starting then with where does career start? 1952 with George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, and her last performance is 1994, so that's 42 years. All right, so this is the second longest career of the four ladies that we're talking about. Okay, so that was Leontine Price at 64, singing Zweite Brautnacht from die Ägyptische Helene by Richard Strauss at the 100th anniversary of Carnegie Hall in 1991. Now, I want to bring your attention to something. We're talking about these four ladies, and I should have brought it up at the very beginning, but I want to bring your attention to the fact that there's only 7 years worth of difference between these ladies. The person who is the eldest is Renata Tebaldi, who was born in 1922. The person who is the youngest is the one who had the shortest career, Antonietta Stella at 1929. So there's only 7 years of difference between these ladies. All of these ladies are born within the same 7 year period. So the fact that This person who is the youngest stopped singing in 1974. This person who is the eldest stopped singing in 1973, or will really stop singing in 1976. This person who is the second eldest stopped singing in 1996, and the second youngest stopped singing in 1994. That's what I was interested in. The fact that all of these ladies are born within the same period. Not, we're not talking about Lindsay Price being born 10 years or 20 years later, right? But still singing until 1994. Within a 7-year period, all of these ladies were born, but their career trajectories are of completely different lengths, all certainly respectable. So, with this chart, there's so much that's so fascinating. But what's so really interesting about this chart is, look, the ruler of the 10th is down here in the midnight portion of the chart, on the IC. And one of the things that so interesting, one of the things that Lansing Price says, one of her quotes is, "You have to burn the midnight oil. You really have to burn the midnight oil when you're working on craft." Note that the sun, which represents recognition and prominence and all of that stuff, is applying to the square of Mars here. This Saturn Mars is action, the sun is prominence. And the challenge, this is a person who loved and thrived on challenges. This sun Mars, the other thing that she talked about was Aida. Remember, we were talking about how Aida is kind of emblematic of the Verdian, of the dramatic Italian wing. And Aida, of course, is the role that she became famous for, and she called it her warrior role. Aida was her warrior role because she used it to conquer all of these different houses up to the Metropolitan Opera. So up to the Met, she used Aida to basically penetrate the world of opera, to conquer the world of opera. And so this sun, she used this warriorship for prominence, for prominence and recognition. So we've got that going on, right? It's nighttime, which means that Mars is also the second ruler of the second triplicity ruler, or the first triplicity ruler of the 10th house. So we don't have to go back over him, but we will. We'll see him again. Then note, and also note that the ruler of the 10th here is on the part of spirit. Okay, so that's another thing. Then we go to the second triplicity ruler, which is Venus. And remember, we want to find the voice. So the voice is Pisces, 15th degree, 16th degree of Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Venus has exaltation there. And Mercury is the significator for the voice. So all of this is ruled by this Jupiter-Venus conjunction, which is squared by the Saturn, and the Saturn is the ruler of the ascendant. So that means that all of this stuff affects the persona, affects the person. It also affects this stuff too, because there's a separating Moon-Saturn opposition. Now, here's an interesting thing. We were looking at this Moon-Saturn opposition with Renata Tibaldi. Now, in that case, it was applying. And when we looked at it from that respect, we also saw that there was negative reception, there was non-reception, right? Because Saturn hates Aries. Saturn was in Libra. Let's just go right back to her. Saturn was in Libra, the moon was in Aries. Saturn hates Aries. So, and the moon in this particular case was also cadent, right? So this was going to be a difficult opposition, a really difficult opposition. But it also would do all of the usual things too. It would create a sense of responsibility, a seriousness, like we just talked. Same thing here. The seriousness. But for some reason, this doesn't feel quite so malefic. I mean, it's still not fun, but it would make the person extremely serious. This is a person who would stop would stop talking for 2 weeks before a performance. Saturn is taciturn. Saturn doesn't speak. This is the person who would not speak if it was a really, really important performance. I mean, that's something opera singers do generally. But that's something, but 2 weeks before an important performance, that's something that Leontine Price would do. So that's the discipline of the Moon Saturn that would say that there wouldn't be struggles, that it wouldn't create struggles. But we would say this looks like there would be more there would be more possibility to organize themselves around the Saturnian. Same thing too here is what? Saturn is the ruler of the ascendant. So it's not just the moon Saturn opposition in the chart. It's the moon opposing the ruler of the ascendant. So it's how the mind affects, right? Remember that the ascendant is the head. So these are both significators for the mind. So it's how the mind works to make things happen. What the information that it takes in to make things happen, right? Because it's all about dissemination of information with these two signs. And of course, also Sagittarius, things that are foreign, the part of fortunes in the ninth house, things that are foreign, right? This is a person from the segregated South, Laurel, Mississippi, how they would come into contact singing in French and Russian and German and Italian and, reading, having to read great literature in order to learn about roles that they were going to be singing on the opera houses of the world. That's a really, I mean, a Renata Tebaldi, an Antonietta Stella, even a fucking Leonie Riesnick. Those three ladies are born in opera towns, are born in, well, Italy is an opera country. Those two places are opera. Every place has an opera house. Vienna is an opera city. It's an opera town. It's one of the biggest opera cities in the world. Leontyne Price is born in Laurel, Mississippi. Mississippi doesn't even have a fucking opera house. Or maybe it does. It might have, something that functions as its opera house. But do you see what I'm saying? It's like the fact that somebody from nothing, absolutely nothing, could become one of the great prima donnas of all time is humongous. Can we see that? And we can see it, and we can see it because of the endowment. Too much of a good thing. I think that this too much of a good thing is explaining the voice. I saw Leontyne Price in 1988 when she was 61, and I have never heard a more beautiful sound. I have never heard a more beautiful voice in my life. I've never heard a more beautiful sound. At 61, it was still the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. At 61. And Leontyne Price was able to do something that nobody else had ever done. Only one other singer had ever done this to me. She was able to, and it's so Pisces, there was a certain point in a song that she sang where the walls moved. I actually saw the walls move away. So like whatever was within my peripheral vision, that moved backwards. And all of a sudden we were floating in this universe with just her, or I was with just her and the music, and nothing like that had I ever experienced. The woman is a fucking sorcerer. So, I mean, you can hear me getting emotional just kind of remembering it. The woman is a fucking vocal sorcerer. Oh, I had to get myself together. Okay, so let's look. Oh, we're there already, right? And we're actually there, right? We talked about the Mars. We're talking about the Venus in respect to the voice, right? It's the voice of command with the ruler of the voice and the natural significator for the voice. All three of these things working together, and all three of these planets are in the term of Venus. She has her term is the first 12 degrees of Pisces. So all three of these planets are in Venus's term, which means that Venus is in her own exaltation. She's in triplicity, although she's not the main triplicity ruler, and she's in the term. So she's the winner. She's the Almuten of the Jupiter, even. She's the Almuten of all these planets. She may not be the Almuten here, because this is Jupiter's, if I'm not mistaken, this is Jupiter's turn. But she is the winner, the Almuten over these three planets, which include the ruler of the second and the significator of the voice. So we've got this exalted Venus, the super, super strong exalted Venus, who's also the ruler of not only the part of fortune, but the part of spirit. So this is different from Antonietta Stella, isn't it? Because now we've got the ruler of the part of fortune, the ruler of the part of spirit, with in her exalted with the Jupiter in its own sign. So we had a Venus Jupiter prior, but it pointed to different things. This Venus Jupiter points to an extravagance, too much of a good thing. The voice itself is too much of a good thing, an extravagance of voice. And certainly that's the case. In the last video, I talked about how this person had two voices. And note how we've got all these double-bodied signs. Even though it's fixed on the ascendant, the ruler of the ascendant is double-bodied, the moon is double-bodied, the sun is fixed, but then all of these that indicate the voice itself are double-bodied. And this woman had two voices. She would even talk about it. She would talk about going from a nuance to a forte. She had the big wamba voice, and then she had this lighter, beautiful, brilliant, like light lyric voice that she could go back and forth with ease. And she could be two different types of soprano. She could be a lyric Mozart soprano, and then she could be a Zinka Milanov Verdi soprano. So that kind of thing is happening. No, so we've got that going on with the voice of command and with also what the voice is happening. But then this third one is the moon. That's another reason I think that no, we can't really be talking about how what's the word I'm looking for? How durable or stable, right? We can't be looking at these this way because the planets just don't add up, right? But the nice thing about that is note that the moon's next application is to the Venus. So this Venus is really everything. This exalted Venus is everything in this chart. And even the fact that the Venus is just separated herself from the ruler of the ascendant. Venus is everything in this chart. Now let's look and see where is the ruler, or where is the part of kingdom. So it's nighttime, so that means Saturn to Sun. So Saturn to Sun is forward 60 degrees and forward 14. So 10 degrees of Aquarius to 10 degrees or 11 degrees of Aries, and plus 14 is 25 degrees of Aries, right? So does either Saturn or Mars have connection to Aries? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Mars is the ruler of Aries, and not only is Mars the ruler of Aries, but Sun is the exaltation ruler. The Sun Mars is the ruler. So this is a hardworking person. This is a person who's really involved in action around their prominence. And so that kind of adds to it. So we've got the Mars in Taurus in its own, in its detriment, but also it's on the ruler of the spirit. And it does indeed have the ruler of the 10th does indeed have some kind uh, of issue or some kind of dignity in Aries. So so that's where we are. Mind you, Leontine Price is the only one of these ladies. Of course, Leonie Riesnick was still singing, but she was the only one of a day gone by to be invited to sing at the 100th anniversary in 1991 of Carnegie Hall. So just the fact I basically tried to show all of these ladies not quite in their prime, so we could kind of get an idea of where they ended. Knowing even though 1963 isn't that far for Antonia Stella, we got an idea of kind of where things went. I didn't want to show you how things started. I wanted to give you an idea of where things were going. Okay, so that's the video.